The breaking moment came when he didn't react the way I expected. I wanted him to look hurt, maybe jealous, maybe even angry, something that would make me feel powerful. Instead, he smiled once, not warmly, but like he'd just solved a question he'd been carrying for months. He pulled out his phone, opened our shared group chat with friends, and typed one message: "I'm heading out, don't wait." Then he placed his keys on the table in front of everyone, like a public goodbye, and walked away while I was still laughing. The laughter died in my throat because I realized the crowd wasn't laughing with me anymore. They were watching me lose him in real time, and for the first time, I didn't look confident. I looked replaceable. But let me back up. My name is Odessa Virel, and 3 months ago I thought I had everything figured out. I'm 32, work in marketing administration for a decent company downtown, and I've always prided myself on being the sharp one in any room. The one with the quick comeback, the clever observation, the ability to turn any conversation my way. Malcolm, my husband of 8 years, used to say it was one of the things he loved about me. Used to. Our apartment is one of those open-plan places where the kitchen flows into the living room, all modern lines and exposed brick that makes everything feel like a stage. Perfect for entertaining, which we did regularly. Malcolm's the quiet type, steady and thoughtful, the kind of man who listens more than he talks. I always figured that made us a good team. He was the foundation, I was the fireworks. That particular Saturday night in October, we were hosting our usual crowd. My mother Ruth was there, perched on our grey sectional sofa with a glass of wine, her silver hair perfectly styled as always. She's 60 and has never met an opinion she didn't want to share loudly. My father Jerome sat beside her, nodding along like he's done for 35 years of marriage, keeping the peace by staying quiet. Malcolm's sister Diane had come too, practical and protective as always. At 37, she's got that no-nonsense energy that makes her seem older than she is. She was helping Malcolm arrange appetizers in the kitchen while I held court in the living room. "So, Lucas brings me coffee this morning," I was saying, gesturing with my wine glass for emphasis. "And he's got this look on his face, you know, like he's planning something." Lucas Hent works in my office, 3 cubicles down from mine. He's 29, all charm and attention-seeking energy, the type who flirts with everyone and makes it seem effortless. For the past few months, we'd been having what I told myself were harmless conversations, coffee breaks that ran long, texts that had nothing to do with work. "Oh, Odessa," my friend Vanessa laughed from her spot on the love seat. She's 33 like me, been my confidant since college, always encouraging me to live boldly, as she puts it. "You're terrible. What did Malcolm say?" I glanced toward the kitchen where Malcolm was methodically arranging cheese and crackers on a wooden board. His dark hair was starting to show grey at the temples, and he had that focused expression he gets when he's concentrating. He looked up at the sound of his name, those steady brown eyes meeting mine across the room. "Malcolm doesn't mind," I said, loud enough for him to hear. "He knows I need intellectual stimulation. Right, honey?" Malcolm's expression didn't change. He just went back to arranging crackers in perfect rows. "Besides," I continued, feeling emboldened by the wine and the audience, "it's not like he's the only one who gets my attention. I mean, I could replace him any time if I wanted to." The words came out as a joke, but they hung in the air longer than I expected. My mother laughed, that sharp bark of approval she gives when she thinks I'm being particularly clever. "That's right, sweetheart," Ruth said. "Keep him on his toes. Malcolm's always been too serious anyway." But I noticed Diane had stopped moving in the kitchen. Vanessa was looking at me with something that might have been concern. Even my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I'm just saying," I pressed on, because backing down wasn't in my nature. Modern relationships don't have to be about jealousy and possession. We're evolved people here. Malcolm knows he's not the only one who appreciates me. That's when it happened. Malcolm looked up from the cheese board, and instead of the hurt or anger I was expecting, he smiled. Not a warm smile, not a loving smile, but something cold and final. like a door closing. He wiped his hands on a dish towel, pulled out his phone, and typed into our group chat while everyone watched. The message appeared on our phones simultaneously. "I'm heading out. Don't wait." Then he walked to the coffee table, placed his keys down with a deliberate click, and headed for the door. No argument, no scene, no drama, just quiet, methodical action. "Malcolm," Diane called after him, but he was already gone. The apartment fell silent except for the sound of the door closing. I was still holding my wine glass, still wearing what I thought was a confident smile, but something had shifted in the room. The energy had changed, and suddenly I wasn't the clever one anymore. I was the woman whose husband had just walked out while she was bragging about replacing him. "Well," my mother said, trying to fill the silence, "he'll be back. Men always come back." But Vanessa was staring at her phone, and Diane was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, and my father was looking anywhere but at me. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to say. The next morning, Malcolm still wasn't home. I woke up alone in our king-size bed, the other side unslept in, and found a text from him time-stamped at 2:47 a.m. "Staying at Dave's. We'll talk soon." Dave was his college roommate who lived across town. The fact that Malcolm had somewhere to go, that he'd planned this, made my stomach knot in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. I made coffee in our gleaming kitchen, the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making everything look stark and empty. Our daughter Miri was at my parents' house for the weekend, a sleepover we'd planned weeks ago. At 7 years old, she was blissfully unaware of the tension that had been building in our marriage. By Monday morning, I'd convinced myself that Malcolm was overreacting. One joke, one moment of honesty about the reality of modern relationships, and he'd turned it into some kind of dramatic statement. I got ready for work with extra care, choosing a fitted black dress that I knew looked good on me, styling my auburn hair in loose waves. The office buzzed with its usual Monday energy. Our marketing firm occupied 2 floors of a downtown building, all glass walls and collaborative spaces designed to foster creativity. I'd been there for 4 years, worked my way up from assistant to coordinator, and I knew how to navigate the social dynamics. Lucas was at his desk when I arrived, his blonde hair perfectly tousled, wearing one of those casual button-downs that somehow looked expensive. He looked up when I passed, giving me that crooked smile that had started this whole thing. "Coffee?" he asked, already standing. "Always," I replied, but something felt different, less exciting, more complicated. In the break room, Lucas poured coffee into 2 mugs while I leaned against the counter. The space smelled like French roast and the vanilla creamer someone had spilled earlier. "So," he said, handing me a mug, "how was your weekend?" I almost told him about Malcolm walking out, about the keys on the table, and the silence that followed. But something stopped me. Instead, I shrugged. "Fine. Quiet." Lucas studied my face with those blue eyes that had seemed so charming a few days ago. "You sure? You seem off." "Just tired," I lied, taking a sip of coffee that tasted bitter despite the cream. But word travels fast in an office environment. By lunch, I could feel the whispers following me down the hallways. Someone had seen Vanessa's Instagram story from Saturday night, the one where she'd been recording our conversation. The video was only 10 seconds long, but it caught my voice saying I could replace him any time, followed by the awkward silence. I found Vanessa in the bathroom during lunch, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. Her reflection met mine, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Discomfort. "Vanessa," I started, but she held up a hand. "Look, Odessa, I'm sorry about posting that. I thought it was funny in the moment, but maybe it wasn't the best idea." "What do you mean?" She turned to face me, her expression careful. "I mean, people are talking, and not in a good way. People are always talking, not like this." She put her lipstick away and shouldered her purse. "Maybe you should talk to Malcolm, really talk to him." After she left, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked the same as always. Sharp green eyes, defined cheekbones, the kind of face that photographs well. But something was different in my expression, a tightness around my eyes that hadn't been there before. That evening, I came home to an apartment that felt too quiet. Malcolm's coffee mug wasn't in the sink. His jacket wasn't on the chair by the door. Small absences that somehow made the space feel enormous. I opened our laptop to check our joint bank account, a routine I'd done hundreds of times, but the password had been changed. When I tried to log into our shared streaming services, same thing. New passwords, access denied. My phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. Change some passwords for security. We'll discuss everything soon. Security, as if I was a threat to our own accounts. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. His voice, recorded weeks ago, sounded warm and familiar. "You've reached Malcolm. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." "It's me," I said after the beep. "This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk like adults." He didn't call back. Tuesday brought more whispers at work. I caught fragments of conversations that stopped when I approached. "Saw the video. Her husband left." Lucas said. Lucas himself was keeping his distance. When I suggested coffee, he claimed he was busy. When I stopped by his desk, he kept the conversation strictly professional. The easy flirtation that had felt so thrilling just days ago had evaporated. That night, I drove to Miri's school to pick her up from after-school care. She bounded toward me with her usual 7-year-old energy, her dark hair in pigtails, backpack bouncing. "Where's Daddy?" she asked as I buckled her into her car seat. "He's working late, sweetheart." "He's been working late a lot." Out of the mouths of babes, even Miri had noticed Malcolm's absence, and I realized he'd been pulling away long before Saturday night. The signs had been there, the late nights at the office, the quiet responses to my stories about work, the way he'd stopped laughing at my jokes. Wednesday morning brought an email that made my hands shake. Calendar reminder, law office appointment, 2 p.m. It was in Malcolm's shared calendar, the one we used to coordinate our schedules. A law office appointment he hadn't mentioned, scheduled for that afternoon. I tried calling him again. Voicemail. I texted, "Saw your calendar, what's this about?" His response came an hour later. "Taking care of some things. We'll talk soon." That afternoon, I found myself parked across the street from Brennan and Associates, a family law firm downtown. At exactly 2 p.m., I watched Malcolm walk through their glass doors, wearing his navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase I'd given him for his birthday 2 years ago. He was inside for 90 minutes. When he emerged, his expression was unreadable, but there was something different in his posture. More resolved, maybe. More certain. That night, I sat in our empty apartment scrolling through social media, watching my world shift in real time. Vanessa had taken down the video, but screenshots lived forever. Someone had shared it in a local Facebook group with the caption, "When keeping it real goes wrong." The comments ranged from supportive to savage. "Girl needs to learn when to stop talking." Her husband dodged a bullet by leaving. Some people don't know when they have something good. But the worst part wasn't the strangers judging me. It was the silence from people I thought were friends. No supportive texts, no calls checking if I was okay. Just the growing realization that I'd miscalculated badly, and the consequences were spreading through my life like cracks in glass. By Thursday, I was desperate to regain control of the narrative. Malcolm was still staying at Dave's, still responding to my texts with polite, distant messages that felt like talking to a stranger. Miri kept asking when Daddy was coming home, and I kept making excuses that sounded weaker each time. I decided to take action. If Malcolm wanted to play games, I could play too. "Lucas," I said, appearing at his desk during lunch, "want to grab dinner tonight? There's this new place downtown I've been wanting to try." He looked up from his computer, surprised. "I don't know, Odessa." Things are kind of complicated right now. What's complicated? We're adults having dinner. Your husband, my husband is being dramatic about a joke. That's not your problem. Lucas glanced around the office, checking who might be listening. Maybe we should keep things professional for a while. Since when are you professional? I leaned against his desk, lowering my voice. Come on, one dinner. We'll go somewhere nice, somewhere we can actually talk without all this office noise. He hesitated, and I could see him wavering. Lucas had always been weak to flattery, to the idea that he was irresistible. It's what had made our flirtation so easy in the first place. Okay, he said finally, but somewhere quiet. We met at Meridian, an upscale bistro in the Arts District. The kind of place with exposed brick walls and Edison bulb lighting that made everything look romantic. I'd chosen it deliberately, knowing it was the type of restaurant where people from our social circle might see us. Lucas arrived first, already seated at a corner table when I walked in. He'd changed from his work clothes into dark jeans and a grey sweater that brought out his eyes. For a moment, I felt that familiar thrill of being seen with someone attractive, someone who wanted to be there with me. You look nice, he said as I sat down. Thank you. I'd worn a red dress that I knew was flattering, styled my hair carefully. If Malcolm wanted to play the distant husband, I could play the desirable wife. We ordered wine, made small talk about work, but there was an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there before. Lucas seemed nervous, checking his phone frequently. So, I said after our entrees arrived, how long are you going to let office gossip dictate your social life? It's not just office gossip, Odessa. Your husband left. That's serious. Malcolm left because he can't handle a confident woman. That's his problem, not mine. Lucas put down his fork, studying my face. Do you really believe that? What's that supposed to mean? I mean, maybe he left because his wife was publicly talking about replacing him while flirting with another man. The words hit harder than I expected. We're friends, Lucas. We have conversations. If Malcolm can't handle that... We're not just friends. His voice was quiet but firm. We've been texting constantly, having lunch together, staying late to work on projects that don't exist. You know what this is. I did know. The past 3 months had been a slow slide into something I'd been careful not to name. Coffee breaks that turned into long walks. Text conversations that had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with the way Lucas made me feel seen, appreciated, desired in ways Malcolm hadn't in years. So what if we are? I said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. I'm not dead just because I'm married. Lucas pulled his hand away. Your husband is a good guy, Odessa. He doesn't deserve this. You didn't seem concerned about Malcolm when you were texting me at midnight. That was before he walked out in front of everyone, before I saw what this was doing to you. What it's doing to me, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine, and we both knew it. The confident woman who'd made that joke on Saturday night felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone desperate to prove she was still desirable, still in control. We finished dinner in uncomfortable silence. Lucas walked me to my car, but the easy chemistry that had sustained our flirtation for months was gone, replaced by something that felt too much like pity. Odessa, he said as I unlocked my car door, maybe you should call Malcolm. Really talk to him. Everyone keeps telling me to talk to Malcolm. What if I don't want to? Then you're going to lose him. Maybe I don't care. But as I drove home through the city streets, past the glowing windows of restaurants and bars, where other couples were having normal conversations about normal things, I realized I was lying. To Lucas, to myself, to everyone. Friday brought a family dinner at my parents' house, a weekly tradition that suddenly felt like walking into a minefield. My mother had insisted Malcolm come, refusing to believe that our separation was anything more than a temporary spat. I arrived with Miri, who was excited to see her grandparents and disappointed that Daddy wasn't with us. The house smelled like my mother's pot roast, familiar and comforting in a way that made me feel like a child again. "Where's Malcolm?" my mother asked immediately, kissing my cheek and taking Miri's backpack. "He's working." "On a Friday night? That's ridiculous." My father emerged from the living room, tall and grey-haired, wearing the cardigan my mother had bought him for Christmas. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, hugging me carefully. Jerome Danton had spent 62 years avoiding conflict, and I could see him calculating how to navigate this dinner. "I invited someone else," I announced as the doorbell rang. "A friend from work." My mother's eyes lit up with curiosity. My father looked concerned. Miri was already running to answer the door, and I heard Lucas's voice greeting her in the foyer. He appeared in the kitchen doorway looking handsome and nervous, holding a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom, Dad, this is Lucas Hent. Lucas, these are my parents, Ruth and Jerome." My mother practically glowed with interest. "Lucas, how lovely to meet you. Odessa's told us so much about you." That was a lie, but my mother had always been good at filling in blanks with her imagination. Lucas shook hands with my father, who was studying him with the careful attention of a man who'd raised daughters. "Nice to meet you, sir." "Lucas works in my department," I said, guiding him into the living room. "He's brilliant with campaign strategies." We settled into the familiar rhythm of family dinner, but everything felt wrong. Lucas sat where Malcolm usually sat, answered questions about his work and his background, charmed my mother with compliments about her cooking. But I could see the strain in his smile, the way he kept checking his phone. Miri, bless her 7-year-old heart, kept asking innocent questions that landed like bombs. "Are you Mummy's new friend? Do you know where Daddy is? Why doesn't Daddy come to dinner anymore?" My mother deflected these questions with the skill of someone who'd spent decades managing uncomfortable family dynamics. My father grew quieter as the evening progressed, and I could feel his disapproval like a weight in the room. After dinner, while my mother was getting dessert and Miri was playing in the living room, my father cornered me in the kitchen. "Odessa," he said quietly, "what are you doing?" "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean. That young man is not just a friend." "Dad, your husband is a good man. He's been part of this family for 8 years. He loves you, and he loves Miri." "Malcolm left, Dad. He walked out. Maybe he had reasons." The words stung because they carried the weight of my father's disappointment, something I'd rarely experienced. Jerome Danton might avoid conflict, but he wasn't blind. "I'm handling my marriage," I said. "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're destroying it." Before I could respond, Lucas appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt. I should probably head out." I walked him to his car, the October air crisp against my skin. Under the streetlight, Lucas looked younger, more uncertain. "Your family is nice," he said, but there was something final in his voice. But I can't do this anymore, Odessa. Your daughter kept asking about her father, and I kept thinking about how I'd feel if someone did this to me." "Did what to you?" "Helped break up a family." He got in his car without kissing me goodbye, without making plans to see me again. I stood in my parents' driveway, watching his taillights disappear, feeling something crack inside my chest. When I went back inside, my mother was washing dishes with unusual vigor, and my father was reading to Miri in the living room. The evening felt broken, irreparable. "Mom?" I said, picking up a dish towel. "That boy is too young for you," she said without looking up from the sink. "I thought you liked him." "I like Malcolm." It was the first time my mother had ever chosen my husband over me, and it hit harder than I expected. Ruth Danton had always been my fiercest defender, my loudest cheerleader. If I was losing her support, I was in deeper trouble than I'd realized. That night, I put Miri to bed in our apartment, reading her favorite story about a princess who saves herself. But when she asked again when Daddy was coming home, I didn't have an answer that felt true. After she fell asleep, I sat in our living room with a glass of wine, staring at the coffee table, where Malcolm had placed his keys 6 days ago. The apartment felt like a museum of our life together. Wedding photos on the mantel, Miri's artwork on the refrigerator, the throw pillows Malcolm had picked out because he said they made the place feel like home. For the first time since this started, I let myself imagine what it would feel like if he never came back. The weekend passed in a blur of silence and regret. Malcolm picked up Miri on Saturday morning for their planned father-daughter day, appearing at our door looking tired but determined. He was polite to me, distant but not cruel, treating me like an acquaintance rather than the woman he'd shared a bed with for 8 years. "We need to talk soon," he said as Miri gathered her jacket and backpack. "Okay, when?" "I'll call you tomorrow." But Sunday came and went without a call. Instead, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize, brennanlaw@brennanassoc.com. "Mrs. Virel," it read, "please find attached preliminary financial disclosure forms that require your review and signature. We recommend you seek independent legal counsel. Regards, Patricia Brennan, attorney at law." My hands shook as I opened the attachments. Page after page of legal documents, our entire financial life reduced to spreadsheets and legal terminology. Bank statements, mortgage information, retirement accounts, even Miri's college fund. Everything catalogued, itemized, divided. But the worst part was the evidence section. Screenshots of text messages I'd sent Lucas. Timestamps showing when I'd left work early to meet him. Credit card receipts from restaurants where we'd had lunch, dinners, coffee dates that had stretched into the evening. Malcolm had been watching, documenting, preparing. While I thought I was being clever, he was building a case. Monday at work was a nightmare. The weekend had given office gossip time to ferment, and I could feel the judgment following me through the hallways. Conversation stopped when I approached. People who used to greet me warmly now offered tight smiles and hurried past. Lucas avoided me entirely. When I tried to approach his desk, he was either on a call or in a meeting. When I sent him an email asking to talk, he responded with one line. "I think it's best if we keep things professional." Professional. As if the past 3 months had been a business transaction. During lunch, I overheard 2 colleagues talking in the break room. "Did you see the video?" "I heard her husband hired a lawyer." Lucas said she was getting too intense. Too intense. The words burned because they carried the weight of dismissal, the suggestion that I was the problem, the one who'd misunderstood the situation. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my stomach drop. Someone had shared the video of my Saturday night joke on a local Facebook group called Downtown Drama, adding their own commentary. "When you tell your husband you can replace him and he takes you seriously." The comments were brutal. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Her poor husband, he deserves better. Some people don't know when to keep their mouth shut. She looks like the type who thinks she's God's gift." But the worst comment came from someone I recognized, Jennifer Walsh, a woman from Miri's school pickup line. "Isn't this the mom from Riverside Elementary? Yikes, poor kid." They were talking about my daughter now. My personal drama was bleeding into Miri's world, threatening to make her a target for other children's questions and other parents' judgment. I called Vanessa, desperate for support from someone who knew me, who understood the context. "Vanessa, did you see the Facebook post?" "I saw it." Her voice was careful, distant. "Can you believe what people are saying?" "Odessa, maybe you should stay off social media for a while. They're attacking me based on 10 seconds of video. They don't know the whole story." "What is the whole story?" The question hung between us, loaded with meaning. Vanessa had been encouraging me to live boldly for months, cheering on my flirtation with Lucas, laughing at my complaints about Malcolm being boring. But now, faced with the consequences, she was backing away. "The story is that I made a joke and everyone overreacted." "It wasn't just a joke, Odessa. You've been having an affair." "I haven't been having an affair. We're friends." Friends don't text each other at midnight. Friends don't have secret dinners. Friends don't bring each other to family events while their husbands are staying at other people's houses. The words hit like physical blows because they carried the weight of truth I'd been avoiding. I thought you were on my side. I am on your side. That's why I'm telling you to stop this before it gets worse. But it was already worse. Tuesday brought another email from the lawyer, this time requesting my employment records and a list of my recent social activities. Wednesday, my bank card was declined at lunch, and when I called the bank, I learned that Malcolm had frozen our joint accounts pending legal proceedings. I had to call my mother to borrow money for groceries. "Odessa, what is happening?" Ruth demanded when I showed up at her house that evening. "Malcolm is being vindictive. He's trying to control me through money. He's protecting himself legally. There's a difference." My mother, my biggest supporter, was now speaking about Malcolm with something approaching respect. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. "I can't believe you're taking his side." "I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to understand how my daughter went from making a joke at a dinner party to having her bank accounts frozen." "It wasn't just a joke, was it?" my father added quietly from his chair in the living room. "There's more to this story." They were both looking at me with expressions I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with concern, love tempered by disapproval. For the first time in my life, I felt like I'd lost my parents' unconditional support. That night, alone in the apartment with Miri sleeping in her room, I made the mistake of diving deeper into social media. The video had spread beyond the local Facebook group. Someone had posted it on Twitter with the hashtag #NotRelatableWifeProblems, but the responses were anything but supportive. My phone buzzed with direct messages from strangers. "Your husband is better off without you." "Hope your side piece was worth losing your family." "Some women don't deserve good men." But mixed in with the cruelty were a few messages of support. "Don't let them shame you for being honest about your needs." "Marriage is hard. People make mistakes." "Your husband sounds controlling. You're better off." The supportive messages should have felt validating, but instead they made me feel worse. These strangers were defending a version of me that felt increasingly foreign, a confident woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. But sitting alone in my empty apartment, scrolling through comments from people who didn't know me, I felt anything but confident. Thursday brought the worst development yet, a call from Miri's school. "Mrs. Virel, this is Principal Martinez. I'm calling because some parents have expressed concerns about a video circulating on social media that appears to feature you. While we don't typically involve ourselves in parents' personal lives, we want to ensure that Miri's school environment remains positive and supportive." My heart sank. What kind of concerns? Questions about whether the current family situation might affect Miri's emotional well-being. One parent suggested that perhaps she should stay with her father during this difficult time. "That's ridiculous. I'm her mother." "Of course. We're not making any recommendations. We simply wanted you to be aware that there's been discussion." After I hung up, I sat in my car in the school parking lot, watching other parents pick up their children. These were people I'd chatted with casually for 2 years, fellow members of the PTA, parents I'd coordinated playdates with. Now they were looking at me differently, whispering to each other, protecting their children from whatever chaos I might bring into their orderly lives. When Miri bounded out of the building with her usual 7-year-old energy, I felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. Whatever mistakes I'd made, whatever consequences I was facing, she was innocent. She deserved better than becoming collateral damage in her parents' war. "How was school, sweetheart?" "Good. Emma's mom asked me if you and Daddy are getting divorced." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. "What did you tell her?" "I said I don't know. Are you?" I looked at my daughter's face, so trusting and confused, and realized I didn't have an answer. Malcolm and I hadn't talked about divorce explicitly, but the legal documents suggested it was inevitable. The frozen accounts, the evidence gathering, The careful documentation of our separation. These weren't the actions of a man planning to reconcile. I don't know, baby. Daddy and I are trying to figure some things out. Is it because of your friend Lucas? The question came with such innocent clarity that it took my breath away. If a 7-year-old could see the connection between Lucas and our family's problems, how had I convinced myself that no one else would notice? That night, after Miri was asleep, I poured myself a large glass of wine and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 10 days ago, I'd been a confident woman making a joke at a dinner party. Now I was a social pariah whose marriage was dissolving in public, whose reputation was being dissected by strangers on the internet. I thought about calling Malcolm, trying to explain, trying to apologize. But every time I reached for my phone, I remembered the way he'd smiled that night. Cold, final, resolved. He'd already made his decision. The legal documents weren't a negotiation. They were a conclusion. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation, or the frozen accounts, or even the loss of friends. The worst part was the growing realization that I'd destroyed something real and valuable for something that had never been substantial at all. Lucas had been an escape, a validation, a way to feel desired and appreciated, but he'd never been worth losing Malcolm. The problem was, I'd realized it too late. The call came on a Friday morning while I was getting Miri ready for school. Malcolm's voice on the phone was calm, professional, like he was scheduling a business meeting. "We need to talk, today, if possible." "Okay, where?" "My lawyer's office, 2 o'clock. "Your lawyer's office? Malcolm, can't we just— 2 o'clock, Odessa. Brennan and Associates on 5th Street. You're welcome to bring representation." He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in our kitchen while Miri ate cereal and chatted about her plans for show and tell. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't even know how to find one. The whole concept of needing legal representation against my own husband felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. I dropped Miri at school and spent the morning researching family law attorneys online, reading reviews and trying to understand retainer fees I couldn't afford with my accounts frozen. Finally, I called my father. "Dad, I need help." "What kind of help, sweetheart?" "Malcolm wants to meet at his lawyer's office this afternoon. I need representation." There was a long pause. "Odessa, maybe you should hear what he has to say first." "You think I should go alone?" "I think you should consider the possibility that Malcolm isn't your enemy here." But when I walked into the offices of Brennan and Associates at 1:55 p.m., it certainly felt like walking into enemy territory. The reception area was all polished wood and leather chairs, designed to project authority and success. A young receptionist with a perfect smile directed me to a conference room where Malcolm was already seated beside a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and sharp eyes. "Odessa," Malcolm stood when I entered, but didn't move to hug me or even shake my hand. "This is Patricia Brennan, my attorney." "Mrs. Virel." Patricia's handshake was firm, professional. "Please, have a seat." I sat across from them at a polished conference table, feeling underdressed in my work clothes and overwhelmed by the formality of it all. This was my husband of 8 years, the man who'd held my hand during labor, who'd taught our daughter to ride a bike. Now he was sitting across from me with legal counsel, treating me like a business adversary. "Malcolm asked me to arrange this meeting because he wants to discuss the terms of your separation in a civilized manner," Patricia began, opening a thick folder. "He's prepared to be generous, but there are conditions." "Conditions?" Malcolm spoke for the first time since the introductions. "I want joint custody of Miri, with her primary residence being with me. You can have her on weekends and 1 evening per week." "What? No, absolutely not." "Odessa," Patricia's voice was calm but firm. "Given the circumstances, Malcolm's proposal is quite reasonable." "What circumstances?" She slid a folder across the table. "Your affair with Lucas Hent, documented over the past 3 months. Your public statement about replacing your husband. Your introduction of Mr. Hent to your family while you and Malcolm were separated. The social media attention that's now affecting your daughter's school environment. Each item hit like a physical blow. They had everything: text messages, restaurant receipts, witness statements. My mother's neighbor had apparently seen Lucas leaving our house one afternoon when Malcolm was at work. A co-worker had provided a statement about our frequent private conversations. "This isn't an affair," I said weakly. "You never what?" Malcolm's voice was quiet but steady. "Never kissed him. Never told him you were thinking about leaving me. Never spent 3 hours at his apartment last Tuesday." I stared at him. "How do you know about Tuesday?" "Because I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago." The words hit like ice water. "You what?" "You started acting differently in August, staying late at work, being secretive with your phone, talking about Lucas constantly. I hoped I was wrong, but I needed to know." Patricia opened another folder. "We have photographs, GPS data from your phone, credit card records. Your affair is well documented, Mrs. Virel." "It's not an affair." The words came out louder than I intended, desperate. "We're friends. Yes, maybe I developed feelings, but we never—" "You never what?" Malcolm's calm was starting to crack. "Never planned to leave me for him, because I have text messages that suggest otherwise." She slid a printed screenshot across the table. It was a text I'd sent Lucas 3 weeks ago. "Sometimes I think about what it would be like if we didn't have to hide this, if I was free to be with someone who really sees me." Reading my own words in that sterile conference room, they looked different than they had when I'd typed them. Less romantic, more calculating, less like a woman in love and more like a woman planning an escape. "I was confused," I said. "I was going through a difficult time in our marriage." "A difficult time that you created," Malcolm said. "I've been the same husband I've always been, Odessa. You're the one who changed." He was right, and we all knew it. Malcolm had been steady, reliable, the husband I'd married. He worked, came home, attended Miri's events, read bedtime stories. I decided that wasn't enough. "What do you want?" I asked. "Stability for Miri," Malcolm said. "A home without confusion over mommy's friend at dinner. No school whispers about divorce videos online." His words cut precisely. "I want a clean break. I keep the house. You get your retirement, half the savings, child support. Miri stays with you every other weekend. She's my daughter. Ours. She needs one parent thinking clearly." Patricia slid the terms across. 72 hours to respond. I stared at the papers. 2 weeks from joke to replacement in my daughter's daily life. "What if I fight?" "Court," Patricia said. "We're confident a judge will find this fair." Malcolm stood. "You already destroyed our family, Odessa." He left. I sat alone, sunlit dust motes swirling like my shattered choices. Driving to Mom's, I admitted the affair. She sighed. "Come over." But Malcolm had built an airtight case while I played at rebellion. The worst truth, he might be right about what Miri needed. The 72 hours blurred into a fever dream. 3 lawyers echoed the same verdict. Malcolm's proposal was generous. Fighting meant ruinous fees and worse terms. "He documented everything," Carol Stevens said. "Steady job, clean record, no affairs. You have a public scandal and infidelity evidence. I never slept with Lucas. That's irrelevant now. Courts prioritize the child's stability." Monday, I called Patricia Brennan's office. My voice cracked, scheduling the signing. It felt like scheduling my execution. Malcolm collected Miri for their last visit, before routine custody. She chattered excitedly about building a fort at Daddy's. "When am I coming home, Mummy?" "This is your home now, sweetheart. With Daddy. Weekends with me." "Why?" I had no answer that wouldn't wound her more. After they left, the apartment echoed with absence. Scattered toys, Malcolm's forgotten mug, wedding photos mocking me from the mantel. Lucas felt like a ghost. Charm evaporated under real consequences. I didn't call him. Tuesday, I resigned. Whispers in Lucas's nearby cubicle were unbearable. My supervisor accepted without surprise. Wednesday, I packed for a cheaper one-bedroom across town, pull-out couch ready for Miri's weekends. Thursday, I drove past our old house. Malcolm steadied Miri's bike in the driveway, running beside her, hand on the seat. Her laughter rang out. I pulled over and wept, for the life I'd traded for fleeting validation. Friday 2 p.m., courthouse, impersonal, fluorescent lit. Malcolm arrived in our wedding suit, resolute. I signed page after page, custody, property, divorce decree, 8 years reduced to signatures and filing fees. Outside, sunlight mocked the occasion. "Malcolm," I called. He paused. "Odessa. I'm sorry. For the joke, for Lucas, for everything. I know. Is there any chance? No. Gentle. Final. I love you. I know, but love isn't enough." He drove away. I stood alone with papers that ended my marriage. In my dim new apartment, silence pressed in. No family dinner, no daughter's voice. I deleted Lucas's number, messages, photos, erasing the fantasy that cost everything. The woman who'd laughed at that dinner party, flaunting options, humiliating her husband for applause. She was gone. I'd mistaken attention for power, rebellion for strength. Malcolm walked away with dignity. Miri gained stability. I learned the brutal truth. When you threaten to replace someone, you might discover you're the replaceable one. And sometimes, you deserve to be.